Hey, welcome back. In the previous video, we created a reload animation montage. Now we're ready to implement reloading in our code. Now, just like we had a fire button pressed function which sets a boolean be fire button pressed to true, we're going to create a binding to a key and also a console controller button for reloading, and that is going to be bound to a function. So we're going to call that reload button pressed, and that is simply going to call a function called reload weapon. So what is reload weapon going to look like? Well, here's a plan that shows an implementation we could create. So in reload weapon, we could simply see if our combat state is unoccupied. And if we're not unoccupied, we're not in a state where we can reload the weapon, so we can simply return and do nothing. But if we are unoccupied, if we're not doing anything like waiting for the fire timer to finish, then we can check to see if we're carrying ammo on our character. You see, if the weapon is empty, we're trying to reload it, and we can only do so if the character has ammo. So if the character is carrying ammo, then we can play our reload montage and set our combat state to reloading. While we're playing the reloading montage, we're not going to want to be able to fire the weapon. We need to finish reloading before we can fire the weapon, so we can no longer be in the unoccupied state. Remember, if we're not in the unoccupied state, we cannot fire the weapon. So if we set our state to reloading, that takes care of that. The question is, when do we stop being in the reloading state? Well, that's the beauty of animation notifies. We can place an anim notify in our animation in the montage, and that can allow us to get out of the reloading state. So we can create a blueprint callable function called finish reloading. And at the end of our reload montage, at the end of that animation, we can have a notify that will call finish reloading. And that can perform all the actions we need when it comes to updating our ammo counts in our ammo map, and also set our state back to unoccupied so we can fire the weapon again. So these are the three functions that we need to create. So let's go ahead and get started creating these functions. So we're here in shooterCharacter.h. We're going to first want to create an action mapping for reloading, and we're going to do that in project settings. So go to Edit, Project Settings, and go to Input. And here for our action mappings, we're going to create another one called Reload Button. And I think a good key for this would be the R key, because right next to the WASD keys is the R key. You don't have to reach very far. So we can click this select the key value icon and hit the R key, and now we have R assigned to the reload button action mapping. Now I've got my console controller here, and a pretty good weapon is the gamepad face button left, which on the Xbox is the X button. So I'm going to use that for the reload button. So let's go ahead and choose gamepad face button left. And now we have an action mapping called reload button, and we've assigned the R key and the gamepad face button left to reload button. So I'm just going to close project settings, and now we can go back to Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, we're going to create a reload button pressed function. So we need to go all the way up to our protected section, and we're going to create this function called reload button pressed. Now we can have Visual Studio give us an automatic body for this function, and we can then go and bind this in setup player input component. So let's go to that function. Here we are in setup player input component, and here are our bindings, and we only need a pressed. We don't really care when the R key will be released. We just want to know when it's pressed. So I'm going to create a bind action call here, and this will be the reload button. And the function will be reload button pressed. And now that function callback is bound to reload button. So let's look back at our plan here. We have reload button pressed, which is going to call reload weapon. So we need to create a reload weapon function. And it's going to check to see if we're unoccupied, and then check to see if we're carrying ammo. at which point it'll play the montage and set our state to reloading. So let's go ahead and create this function. So in shooterCharacter.h, we're going to create a function called reload weapon. And by the way, these four functions here that went into fire weapon, I can just lump them together and give them a sort of group comment that says fire weapon functions. And for reload button pressed, we'll say bound to the R key and gamepad face button left. And for reload weapon, we'll say handle reloading of the weapon, and we'll create a body for this. So here we are, we have reload weapon, and for reload button pressed, we're just going to call reload weapon. So let's make this function call here, but in the future we may want to do other things when we press this button. So that's why we have the reload button pressed function, which will handle things that should happen when the button is pressed. And thus far, all that we should do is call reload weapon, which will attempt to reload the weapon. And by attempt, I mean first we need to check our combat state. So we're going to check here in reload weapon if combat state is not equal to combat state unoccupied. So if we're not in the unoccupied state, we can simply return. Now next we need to see if we're carrying ammo. Now in order to check to see if we're carrying ammo, we need to see if we have ammo for the particular ammo type that our equipped weapon has. So I'm going to create a comment here that says, do we have ammo of the correct type? Now we're going to need to create a function that will check to see if we're holding ammo of the correct type. Now, for now, we can just assume that we do, but we do need to create a to-do list. So I'm going to create a to-do note here, and this is just telling me that we need to create a function. So we need to create a function that will check to see if we have ammo of the correct type. We can call this a bool function called carrying ammo. So we'll figure out how we're going to implement this in the future. But for now, we'll just create the if check and we'll just pass in true. But we do need to replace this with our carrying ammo function. So we'll put a note here that says replace with carrying ammo. So if we are carrying ammo of the correct type, then we can play the animation montage and set our state to reloading. Now, in order to play an animation montage, we need a variable of type UAnimMontage. So let's go back to shooter character, and in the private section, we'll create a UAnimMontage variable. So this will be UAnimMontage, and we're going to call this reload montage. Now, if we scroll up, we'll see that we have an anim montage up here. It's the hipfire montage. And you'll see that it's edit anywhere, blueprint read write, category combat, and it has the meta specifier. So I'm going to copy that macro, and I'm going to use that for our montage down here. And I'll go ahead and give this a comment and say montage for reload animations. So we'll have this reload montage. And we're going to check that here in reload weapon. So we're going to say if reload montage. And we also need to get our UAnim instance if we're going to play a montage. So UAnim instance, anim instance equals get mesh, get anim instance. That's how we get our anim instance. And we're also going to check the anim instance along with reload montage. So we're going to say if anim instance and reload montage. And in that case, if both are not null, then we can use the anim instance to play the montage. So we're going to say anim instance montage play, and it'll be the reload montage. And we can jump to the section. So anim instance montage jump to section. And which section are we going to jump to? Well, the thing is, this is going to depend on the kind of gun we have. We're going to need to create another to-do here. You see, we're going to have multiple different montage sections with different reload animations based on the type of gun. So we need a weapon type, and usually enums are perfect for things like that. So let's make another to-do here right at the top, just inside of the if true here. And we're going to say to-do create an enum for weapon type. So once we create a weapon type, then each weapon can have its own type, and we can check the equipped weapon to see what its type is. So we'll have another to-do here to say switch on equipped weapons weapon type. And in that switch, we'll check the weapon type and then set the reload section name based on that, because the montage jump to section needs an F name for the section. And so we're going to have that here, F name, and we'll call this montage section, and we'll initialize this for now with the only section we have, which is reload SMG. So we'll go ahead and use that montage section, but once we get around to it, we're going to fulfill these to-dos, and we'll actually switch on the weapon type, and we'll get the correct montage section once we have multiple montage sections. So we've got a couple of things on our to-do list. So we have this reload weapon function, and we're calling it in reload button pressed. But you'll see, according to our plan here, that we wanted to do this in auto fire reset as well. So if we don't have ammo left, in auto fire reset, we're going to call reload weapon. So let's do that as well. So let's search for auto fire reset. Here it is. And right there, we kind of had another to do. We wanted to call reload weapon here. So we're going to call that here. So now we'll call reload when we've fired our weapon and ran out of ammo. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is create our finish reloading function so we can call this from our anim notify. And this will set our state back to unoccupied and update our ammo map. So let's go ahead and create finish reloading right now. So here in shooter character, we'll create another protected function. We're going to make this a void function called finish reloading. And right off the bat, I'll give this a ufunction macro. And this will be a blueprint callable function. So let's go ahead and give this a function body. And here in finish reloading, we're going to update the ammo map. So we're going to say update ammo map. And this is actually going to be a to-do as well. So we've got several to-dos here. We're going to have to actually search through these and implement them. But for now, let's just go ahead and set the combat state equal to eCombat state unoccupied. So this should work. We're just not going to update our ammo map once we reload. Okay, so we can compile this. And you might have caught my typo. I used the comparison operator rather than the assignment operator here when setting combat state. So after fixing that typo, my code compiles successfully. So let's go back into the editor. And here in the editor, the first thing we're going to need to do is go to the character shooter BP, open the full blueprint editor, and we're going to find reload montage. So we'll set this to reload montage. There it is. And compile and save this. And we can close out of that and test out our code. So I'm going to shoot a couple rounds, and then I'll hit the R key. There it is, we're reloading. And of course, our ammo doesn't update on the HUD because we haven't taken care of that. Remember, we made a couple to-dos. We have a to-do list, so we're gonna have to take care of our to-dos, and we'll do that in the next video. But for now, you can be pretty satisfied with the fact that when we hit the R key, we actually play the reload animation. So that's pretty awesome. So we'll take care of the rest of the details in the next video. We'll see you then.